Why don't I play in tournaments? This is by far my #1 most asked question, so here it is. I lag. I mean, I have real life stuff too that I don't really want to divulge on the internet, but that's pretty much it. That's your short answer right there. The longer answer is that in September of 2019, I was living in New York. I drove up to Canada for DreamHack Montreal, there's a Brawlhalla LAN there, and the very next day, the day after the tournament was over, I moved across the country to the West Coast to go to school there. My computer was shipped a few weeks later, and it was completely broken. And when I say broken, I mean it was dented in so many places that it couldn't open or close. All the electronics were pretty much fried. I mean, maybe there was a chance that something was salvageable, but even if it was, I wasn't able to know for 4 months until I was able to get a new one. In early January of 2020, I tried to rebuild it, but they sent me broken pieces, probably a broken motherboard, I wasn't sure though, so I had to return everything and try again. A couple weeks later, I made another attempt, and finally, the computer turned on, and luckily, my old hard drives from the wreckage was safe. They were still intact, and that honestly, it was a bit of a godsend because it meant that all my old video files and footage I'd gathered weren't completely lost, although by that point, a lot of it I had to scrap anyway because it was so outdated. That's beside the point. Anyway, this is all to say that I was 4 months behind the competition. I missed a BCX because of it. I was on a much laggier server, and I wouldn't really be able to commit time to a full day tournament or even practice for it because I was trying to navigate and succeed in my first year of college. Because of these factors, I decided I'd focus fully on school for now and bunker down to catch up to everyone else once the 2020 LAN season started.
And then, the funniest thing happened.
As a result, all in-person tournaments were rightfully cancelled, and Brawlhalla tried to make up for this by hosting every major online instead, but the US West server difference paired with my own internet being pretty garbage. If you've seen my streams, then you definitely know what I'm talking about. If you haven't, it's basically just a lot of random input delay that changes the amount of delay depending on the time. So even if I get used to the lag and I get used to, okay, here's how I combo with this much, in 5 minutes it's going to be different. And that basically means that training to compete with the top is a pretty miserable experience, and trying to contest them at their level is exceedingly difficult, especially when you consider that I one bar when connecting to my own server and I'd have to be connecting to a different server to compete anyway. It's just not a winning situation. But if I just left it at that, I feel like this video would be incomplete. I'd be lying by omission because that alone isn't enough to make me completely halt. This may surprise some of you, but I really have an intense competitive drive that wants to be fed. I always want to improve at the things I do, and I'm never really satisfied where I am because I know I can always go up. Because of that, I can kind of get myself to do anything if I just convince myself it's worth it. A great example is Megalovania blindfolded. Because why? Why would you ever sit down and take the time to learn Megalovania, of all pieces, blindfolded? I don't know, I just wanted to. So I sat down and I thought to myself, you know what? If I practice with my eyes closed, I'm gonna be able to do this. I want to do it, I want to improve. This is gonna be a marker for me. It's gonna be a goal that I can set and I can achieve. And I did it. And let me tell you, there was some suffering there. There was some pain, but I did it anyway because, I don't know, I guess I'm an idiot. The point of me bringing all this up is just to say that there are other reasons as well that compound with this lag factor to pretty much seal the deal as to why I don't enter tournaments right now. Some of them are more personal and psychological, things like grappling with anxiety, years of poor sleep finally catching up to me. There's that looming fear that I'm sure I'm not alone, that is just the world is ending every single day and I can't do anything about it. That one sucks. Some of them are external and more uncontrollable, things like my environment, my responsibilities. It's the 99% of things that you will never see from behind the screen, and I also probably never share. It's my private life. So I guess it's more up to your interpretation. Not that I would want you, to be clear, to interpret it and overanalyze and try to dig into that, because that would be weird. But I just feel like I should probably mention that, because it would be incomplete if I didn't. So that's why I don't play in tournaments anymore, but I feel like I should also answer the question, what would it take for me to come back to tournaments, because that's the logical next step. Well, something would have to change about Brawlhalla, and something would have to change about me. Let's talk about Brawlhalla first, since that one's more straightforward. Not easy, mind you, just a more simple answer. It's netcode updates. A while ago in a video, I mentioned that I'd love to see US Central servers so that East and West could play together, but I've since changed my mind after learning about the advancements in netcode in recent years. Brawlhalla already uses rollback, which is one of the best netcodes out there, and it also already has one of the best netcodes in the fighting game genre in general, but it can get even better. It might sound a little bit crazy to suggest that changes to an already good netcode can completely alter the experience of the game, but with the latest innovations in rollback, you can do some pretty insane things. I'm not just saying that US West and US East least can play together normally. I'm saying that you can connect from California to Sweden and have no perceivable input delay from either player. It's been done before, and I've played games where I can fight against European players without additional input delay, but it's never been done on the scale that Brawlhalla would require. It would probably take an egregious amount of developer time, and I doubt they'd commit to that anytime soon since, again, the netcode right now is good enough for the industry standard, but still, I can't help but be a little bit sad knowing that the possibility is there. It's possible that could happen, but it probably won't, or at least won't for the time being, out of what I can only presume are very valid logistical reasons, because to me, obviously, armchair gamer seems like a complete win. But obviously, there's so much that goes into development that I would have no idea about a lot under the hood. Is that the saying? Under the hood? Under the hood of the car, you pull up the hood, you see the engine. I don't know. You get what I'm trying to say. That's the Brawlhalla factor though. Netcode updates, that could bring me back. The second thing though is me. Let's talk about me now. That sounds so egotistical, but I guess this entire video is egotistical, so. I'd say there's 3 big things that need to change for me to reasonably compete in tournaments. One of them I can work through now and have been intensely doing so for the past 7 months or so. One of them I can only start doing if something in the landscape changes, like netcode update for example. And one of them is pretty much completely out of my control. If we're going to turn this into a nice little neat list, then number 1 would be expectation. This is a huge part of anxiety, and you'll hear me talk about this if I ever end up releasing that giant anxiety commentary I've mentioned working on in the past. I don't know, I'm anxious about sharing a video about anxiety, go figure. But expectations are a huge barrier and mental block that you can't really afford to run into long term as a competitor, because otherwise you're just eventually going to self-destruct. I have this problem, this mental bias, where I'm not okay with imperfection despite knowing that perfection is ultimately impossible, and that basically means that I'm never okay with anything that I do, ever. There's this intrusive thought that keeps pelting me in my brain about, well, I'm not going to be as strong of a competitor as I know I was in the past and I know I can be in the future, and it's this mental trap that just stops me from getting back into the swing of things in the first place, because at its core, it's just not accepting where I am in the present. And obviously, this is only in the context of tournaments, but it's a kind of thought that always persists in pretty much everything I do. The thing about grinding to play at a pro level is that you have to be willing to go in knowing you're likely going to have way more bad days than good ones, at least for a while. And if I'm going to be honest, I don't know if I'm mentally healthy enough to handle that right now. And that's not easy to say or to admit, but I think I have to come to terms with the fact that I need to work through some toxic smog in my head before I consider inviting in loads of more ammo for it to use. And by the way, the way more bad days than good ones, that's also a mental bias. I'm going to talk about this at the end, so if that concerns you at all, don't worry. Part of what that's saying is, to compete, you have to be bad, you have to fail. But when you have this overwhelming worldview that started when you were 3 years old, that tells you that if you're not perfect, you're a terrible human being, competition can be a huge catalyst for growing self-hatred and developing apathy as a defense mechanism. There's few things I love more than competition, truly, but I'd probably be a terrible friend to myself if I just let me jump straight into the deep end. As much as I want to jump, I probably shouldn't until I at least learn how to swim again, or get some floaties or something. I don't know what that would be in this analogy. Maybe it's like therapy and you get some techniques or something. Where's Billy? There you are. I'm sorry, I cannot be serious for too long. I just have to do something stupid because otherwise I'm too vulnerable. I just... Gross! Get away from me. I've been working really hard to try and curb my expectations for myself. One of my friends was talking to me about hypothetical situations, and they pointed out to me that it was weird that I said if someone was driving a car and got into an accident with me in the passenger seat, I would feel like it's my fault the car crashed because I could have done more. I feel like I probably shouldn't hold myself responsible for everything that happens in my field of view, but yeah, expectations. For tournaments, I'm trying to learn how to truly recognize, and again, I can know it logically, but understanding it inside is a whole nother thing. Learning that it's okay to be bad, and one day down the line, if I'm entering tournaments again, it's unlikely that I'll perform well for a while. That's the logical answer. Of course I won't win matches right away. But even when I say that out loud now, I don't really believe it. I don't really feel that in my chest. So that's the thing that I've been working to pick away at. It's not easy, but progress. I can definitely see some progress. Another part of this that I wasn't originally going to mention at all, but after watching Bo Burnham's special Inside and listening to the song Don't Wanna Know, I thought, why not? I'll just mention it, and if people hate me for it, they hate me for it. That's inevitable at some point, I suppose. I mean, the fact that I'm talking about my mental instability right now is already going to make some people mad, so might as well double down. Part of what makes it hard to deal with these expectations sometimes is not only that I have expectations for myself that are out of this world, but I feel like I have a lot of people that put me up on some kind of pedestal, which again is probably an egotistical thing to say, but yeah, I don't really get why a bunch of people seem to build me up to be this omega god when half of my commentaries are just talking about all the mistakes I'm making. But yeah, I just kind of want to be bad. Please, can I be bad? More accurately, I guess I should say, is that I don't want people to think of me as more than others. I don't feel like I deserve that. Just because people clicked on a thumbnail X number of times doesn't mean I should be treated better or worse than you or than anyone else, really. It's an uncomfortable feeling knowing that a bunch of people think of me as a status and not as a person. And again, this is a very privileged thing to be wasting your time talking about it. I might regret it later, we'll see. But I'd be lying if I said this wasn't a factor that sometimes comes into my brain and it goes, hey, well, maybe you shouldn't come back at all because the only thing you will ever do is disappoint people. Because that's the only thing you ever do for yourself. That's also why reassurance and reinforcement ultimately won't solve the problem. It can be a nice band-aid to make you feel better temporarily, but in the long run it may even contribute to it, because you can have 1,000, a million people saying, hey, you know what, we're gonna support you, we love you. But if you don't believe it yourself, you are not gonna believe a single word that they say. You need to attack it at its roots. You need to attack your belief, unravel that, understand why you think that, and then you can start to accept things for what they actually are. I hope it doesn't seem like I'm being obnoxiously ungrateful or trying to push aside any positivity, but it's just to illustrate the idea that when you have these kinds of mental biases, you can be genuinely, deeply appreciative of what people will take their own time to do. You can know it's coming from a pure, jovial place. You can even feel warm for a while also simultaneously thinking that you're tricking them, and that if they saw the true you, they wouldn't think so highly. No amount of protest would be able to convince you otherwise if you already think that, so you've got to figure out where that thought comes from in the first place. Anyway, I went a little bit off topic there. That's a little mini tiny sneak peek of the anxiety commentary, I suppose. But if I were to wrap things up in this first point, the thing that would have to change here for me to come back to tournaments is my mental health. And again, I've been continuously working on this with trained help for months and months now. I'm very fortunate to be able to do that. And I'm gonna be honest here, I'm not nearly where I need to be yet, but I'll get there eventually. I really hope. For the record, by the way, I feel like I have to say this, I'm really, and genuinely, I mean this, I am not looking for anyone to feel bad for me or pity or anything like that whatsoever. I am in an incredible situation to even have this be a video topic that people are interested in. It's literally insane. I mean, again, I was just talking about that, so I just feel like if I don't give a full, complete answer, there's this thing in my chest and I don't like it, and I need to just be honest. I can't not. That doesn't sound convincing at all. I don't know if you can tell, I'm really bad at Among Us. I cannot be sussy imposter because I have to be me. I overdid this point. Let's move on to number 2, which is preparation. This is the one that I can start if something in the current environment changes. And the simple fact is that you just have to pour in some amount of hours to compete at a top level. And it's something I haven't been doing for years now. Getting better isn't good enough. You need to get better faster than everyone else. And given that I'm already 2 years behind now, it's a pretty intimidating mountain to climb. Not impossible by any means, but difficult for sure. Where this becomes a big factor is that I'm not able to commit to what's needed at the moment while also pursuing my passion of making videos and streaming like I am right now. And since I can't compete at the moment anyway, I've just been going 100% into this instead. Without mentioning school or some of the other stuff that I won't go into once again, this is a huge time sink. I've been spending at least 10 hours a day, every day, on videos or streaming, and because training for competition takes focused, high-intensity, high-energy sessions, it's challenging to fit that in, even if I could pull the trigger and choose to right now. You may think that because I'm playing Brawlhalla for videos that I'm kind of training anyway, but that's really not the case. It's a completely different approach than intentionally grinding out time to improve. And once again, this is a very, very fortunate problem to have. I'm incredibly lucky that I'm able to even be at a crossroads where I have FOMO about being a competitor or being a creator, because I recognize that that opportunity is not available to everyone. Hopefully, it doesn't seem like I'm just trying to air out my problems and stuff like that. I just, again, want to give the most complete and thought out answer that I could, because I feel kind of yucky if I don't. End of the day, it's probably kind of selfish. So to wrap up number 2, I'm going through this one much quicker. This time management struggle becomes a factor if Brawlhalla does somehow update the netcode and competing from my current location is viable. If that ends up being the case, then I'd have to choose between allowing certain things to suffer, in this context it would be creating videos, in order to pursue others like competing. Finally, we have number 3. This is the simplest one because it's the one that I can't really change or do much about, and I briefly mentioned it earlier, but it's school. Throughout my entire time playing Brawlhalla, I've always prioritized school both for my own reasons and for external ones, so when I go back to take classes again in the fall coming up very soon, competing won't really be an option. The reason why I was able to compete in the first place a couple years ago, and the reason why I have a YouTube channel at all right now, and you can hear my voice, is because I poured so much into school that I could create enough of a successful buffer to justify having video games as a hobby for my life situation. So this one's pretty simple. It's just school is priority number 1, and the thing that would have to change here is I time skip 4 years and graduate, or I train during the summer breaks while having my summer job be content creation. That only starts to become a possibility though if all the other things line up and change first. You can kind of look at it like the overarching final barrier, but all these reasons kind of intertwine anyway, so it's a bit hard to identify the exact order it would take to move in the direction of competing, but this is a useful way to lay it all out anyway. So there you have it. Those are the Brawlhalla reasons and a few of the personal reasons that I'm willing to share as for why I don't play in Brawlhalla tournaments anymore and what it would take for me to come back. I don't want to end this video on a somber note though, because it's not really my style, so I'd like to talk to you now about why I love competing and why I encourage everyone, you included, to give it a try at least once. Competition is one of those rare things that's just devastatingly beautiful in its purity. People think that the best part of competing is winning, and sure, you're not wrong there, but victories themselves are hollow without that sinking abyss of defeat staring at you, breathing over your shoulder, just waiting to tear you down. There's no high point without a low point because then everything is just at the same level. That horrible soul-crushing feeling of a loss and that stress that just builds up before your matches, it's part of what makes it incredible because it's real. In the modern world we live in that's filled to the brim with algorithms and technical innovations, I mean the fact that you're watching this right now is evidence of that. It just constantly distracts us and grabs our attention left and right, and very little feels more grounded to reality than sitting with that heavy emptiness of a failure created by your own hands, and then that tiny spark of motivation to do better the next time igniting within you. I mean, I could talk about this forever. It just gives me so much life. It doesn't matter what it is, whether you're running or swimming or playing piano or chess, Brawlhalla, it doesn't matter. Even small goals that you're just setting for yourself, it's the same. You're giving something your all, knowing full well there's a chance you can't do it, but then trying anyway. It's stressful, it eats you up every single day, but man, does it make you feel alive. Like, there's no other way that I can explain it, just the feeling. I don't know, I cannot wait to go to tournaments again. Just talking about this gets me pumped. If you have the means and the opportunity, I highly recommend attending an event and registering for the tournament. I've talked about this a lot, but I'm in an extremely fortunate position where going to tournaments is part of my job, and I know not everyone can do that, but if it's feasible and if competition can give you the same feeling that it gives me, then I want you to chase that if you can. I'm trying my best not to be all parasocial here, but I truly do wish the best for you. And when I say you, I mean the collective body of people watching this video. Little would make me happier than some of you finding something that brings you a spark of life through these dumb videos that I make. That would be so cool. And I don't know, maybe it's competition, maybe it's not. Totally not for everyone, and that's perfectly okay. But either way, that's something you're gonna have to find out for yourself. And the only way to check off those boxes from the list is to try it, give it a chance. Online tournaments are a great option too. They're like 50, maybe 60% of the way there compared to offline, so if that's your only option, then yeah, give it a try. They're also lower stakes usually than in-person LANs in just terms of competition. Also, you don't have to show your face. Also, with current health climate conditions, it's definitely lower stakes. For the record, not telling anyone to go outside and go to a tournament, that would be irresponsible just when things get better, if they get better. I've talked to a lot of people, and one of the biggest reasons why they don't enter is because of tournament nerves, and that's perfectly reasonable. I mean, look, I talked about handling anxiety as like half this video, so I totally get it. But if it gives you any comfort at all, know that every single top player still gets nervous. It shows itself in different ways, but it's there. You never really get over the stress and the panic of playing in tournaments, you just get better at functioning alongside it over time. And although it seems paradoxical, once you can internalize that idea, it's not nearly as bad bad. You can start looking at your stress as just part of the process, even as an ally, and work with it rather than against it. I'm probably painting a bit of a rosy picture here, but it's because I truly believe that competition, as brutal as it is, as much as it pushes you to your limits, to the brink, it can bring out something incredible. You start reaching a point where if you don't grow dramatically as a person, you won't continue growing as a competitor, as an athlete, as a player, whatever it is, and so you grow. Sometimes to make a breakthrough, you have to actively invite in and combat the very things you may hate the most. Things like inadequacy, weakness, guilt, sacrifice, ego, and self-image, failure. You're willingly facing the full brunt of every single self-protective mechanism your brain has created, not just for the years you've lived up to this point, but for the millions of years of humans and animals before you. We're talking your limbic system and the default mode network. You got the interior cingulate. I don't actually know if any of these are correct. The neuroscientists in the comments can probably explain it better than I can, but you get what I'm trying to say. You're fighting against every fiber in your being. You don't want to invite in loss, you don't want to invite in pain, but you're doing it, and that gives you strength. That's kind of what it's all about. In order to be a healthy competitor, you want to find some level of happiness, of satisfaction, bliss in the moment-to-moment process, because if the only thing that matters to you is the end result, you might just end up imploding in the end. The pursuit of victory is a beautiful driver, it really is, and it's also part of why competing is so hard, because it can't be the only one. You've got to work to find some way to feel complete without the medal around your neck, and some way to recognize your value outside of the bracket or the time splits. And you need to do that when everything in your body and everyone outside of it is telling you otherwise. That's the harsh side of competition sometimes. The cruel reality is that nobody cares about anything you'll do except for the medal. You'll have to find and create that alternate value yourself. Because the only thing the public sees is results. They don't care about the decisions and sacrifices you made unless it makes a good story for them. They won't let you fail because statues are meant to stand, and they don't care about the wholeness that it gives you and that you found in your journey. It's a bit of hyperbole, but the sentiment is important. You can't dictate your success based on other people's judgments because it will never be enough. You're playing their game. What makes it hard is that in order to play your game, you have to kind of make it yourself, and that's hard enough on its own, and then, sometimes our minds can be our biggest opponents. I'm sure you know what I'm talking about, and hello, ding dong, that's some inserting myself into there. As a competitor, you have to balance finding and fueling your own will against the constant struggle of your own expectations and failures, and then pair that inner conflict with the stampede of outside pressure, feeding that machine gun of intrusive doubts and fears back into your mind, and it becomes a compounding challenge. Because somehow you have to be okay with yourself when nobody else is, because again, you will never be good enough to please all of them. Never, ever. And if you try to, you'll be ripped to shreds, left tattered. And I'm saying all this trying to get you to compete, probably a little bit counterproductive there, but it's important because it means the flip side of it is also true. It's not the medal that's the champion, it's not really even the player either, it's the person, it's you. That's what's shimmering golden. It's someone very real, someone with their own struggles, their own highs and lows that you'll never see, their own story running parallel to yours. I've been watching a lot of the Olympics this year, and as nationalistic as it wants to make you, every time I see someone diving into those long pools or leaping over the hurdles or tossing up a tennis ball for the perfect serve, it doesn't matter where they're from, what language they speak, whether or not they represent my flag, I'm brought to tears every single time. It's such an automatic thought. It's so easy for my brain to just see people who don't speak the same language or have an accent as less than human, less real, and then just viciously pit these athletes against each other based on the sliver of them I see in an interview or on social media or something. But I have to not forget that they have just as much emotion, just as much turmoil, just as much doubt, and they've lived just as full a life as I have to get there. The thought of that lights a fire inside of me. It's difficult not to think about the horrors and the atrocities that humans do to each other on a daily basis, but when I see that, just briefly, the inner voice that tells me things are hopeless and I'm a fool to even try making a difference in this world quiets down a little bit, just for a brief moment, and a new one takes its place, saying, if something like that can exist, then damn, it makes living worth it. Bear with me here, this is gonna get corny, but it probably already is, but we're almost done, don't worry. As you climb higher and higher and reach the top of your craft, you start realizing that the results and victory are not what's actually awe-inspiring. It's not the true glory of competition. Rather, it's the person you've become to get there. You face the heartbreak. You face that soul-crushing feeling of giving everything you are into something and then coming up short. It's shattering. But then you decide to keep trying anyway despite everything in your mind rattling against it. That was you. No metal can quantify the strength it takes to do that. It seems natural once you've done it before. It's, you know, it's just a simple feat if you're used to it. But objectively, you zoom out, you look at yourself, and that's remarkable. And if one day you do win, with the deafening crowd and blaring lights on your back, that subtle stillness and shock still filling up your chest, if you can lift that trophy up to your face and the years of yourself you poured into that little brass reflection stares right back at you with the very same eyes as the one in the bathroom mirror that morning, in my opinion, that's the highest honor you can win, because it means you didn't need any gold to be a goddamn champion. All you needed was you. Told you to be corny. Take care, everybody. I'll see you in the next one.